Number 10. Gwenpool. Gwenpool is truly one of the most unstoppable mutants. In fact, she is so unstoppable that she actually was able to make herself a mutant by willing that origin into existence for herself. I know, it's wild. Gwenpool, for those who are unfamiliar, is an alternate version of Gwen Stacy and Deadpool combined, who hails from an alternate reality not yet given an official number. The temporary reality number assigned to it currently by fans is 565. Gwenpool becomes a mutant after Kamala Khan, the current Miss Marvel, refuses to fight her when Gwen tries to instigate a battle, and instead tries to reason with Gwen. Kamala is the one who suggests that Gwenpool's understanding of the fourth wall and her belief that she is simply a character existing in a comic book could be a story that Gwen created as a result of not wanting to acknowledge the truth. The fact that she is actually a reality warping mutant. Possibly. The idea broke Gwen somewhat and caused her to retcon her own origins, instead becoming a reality warping mutant as Kamala had suggested and finding a home on Krakoa with all the other mutants of Earth 616. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and if you love it when we talk about mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Rogue. Rogue is a mutant who truly is considered to be one of the most durable around. She can just take in a power set through absorbing someone's powers, permanently adopting it. In fact, some may not know, but that is actually how Rogue is able to fly and where she gets her strength and her durability from. She actually stole those powers from Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, aka formerly Miss Marvel, which is how she was known at the time. For a long time, Rogue was unable to properly control her powers, causing her to accidentally steal people's memories, powers, and even psyches just from touching them, and causing Rogue to often be much removed from her other fellow mutants, friends, and loved ones, afraid she might hurt them accidentally after she became a hero, and resulting in her basically wearing fully covering outfits, except for her face, of course. However, it was this very fear that apparently prevented Rogue from controlling her abilities, and once she faced it, she gained better control over her powers, making her virtually unstoppable, which is also probably why a lot of writers keep her on the sidelines, or prefer to. She's kinda hard to write because she is so unstoppable now. Number 8. Magneto. Pretty much nothing stops Magneto, not even losing his heart. Now, if you've seen our Unstoppable Superheroes list, then you know what I'm talking about. So for this point, I'm going to talk about another insane feat of Magneto's, other than when he defeated Uranos while completely heartless with some help from Storm. Not only can Magneto sustain his own flow of blood without a heart using his powers, but he could also seriously mess you up by manipulating your blood in your body. Or even worse, mess you up by just pulling out all of the iron from your blood. We've seen him do that too, and it was pretty horrifying, I gotta say. Magneto has also used his mastery of magnetism to perform the kind of blood witchcraft you'd associate more with a magic user, a warlock if we were talking D&D classes, I suppose. Magneto has used this ability to manipulate the blood of his victims to also control their minds, turning them into mindless zombies who will do his bidding as a result of manipulating the flow of blood to their brains. Who needs telepathy when you have magnetic mutant powers, I guess? Number 7. Apocalypse. I mean, there is a whole reality based around the idea of what if Apocalypse was unable to be stopped. This reality is known as Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse. And in this world, Apocalypse becomes pretty much inevitable thanks to the early demise of one man, Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. AOA just goes to show you what a force Apocalypse is, and if you aren't convinced by an alternate reality where Apocalypse rules the world, you can also turn to a more recent X-Men event, Ten of Swords, aka the Otherworld Tournament. During this fight, Apocalypse faced his wife, who was possessed, and even against the seemingly unbeatable foe that was Annihilation, Apocalypse still managed to win, saving his wife and freeing her from the influence of the Golden Helm, while also basically saving all of Krakoa, mutant kind, and Otherworld, possibly the world itself, outside of Otherworld. Number 6. Jean Grey. You know how it goes. We have to talk about the most powerful original X-Men member if we're talking about unstoppable mutants. I just gotta do it. Jean Grey is a force to be reckoned with, and not just because she was the host for the Phoenix Force either. Even without the insane power of the Phoenix Force bonded to her, Jean has done some pretty impossible things, including almost single-handedly defeating Null during the Absolute Carnage event. And okay, yeah, so she didn't really single-handedly defeat Null one-on-one, but honestly, she probably could have if she really wanted to. She was, at the very least, integral to uncovering the God of Symbiote's weakness. Jean has been an unstoppable force many times over, and even while serving on the X-Men team recently, used her powers to single-handedly defeat Nightmare, who has managed to terrorize even Doctor Strange before, and she used her power to defeat Cordyceps Jones and his entire casino, simply by trapping him in an illusion while the X-Men basically did their thing. From within that illusion, Jean says it best when it comes to just how powerful she truly is in issue number 11 of the recent X-Men series. I was Marvel Girl, now I am Jean Grey. I did not even let the Phoenix command me, so what chance do you have? Ooh, fair. I would never try to command Jean Grey. I would only let Jean Grey command me. Number 5. Hope Summers. Hope is pretty understandably unstoppable. I mean, she, combined with the powers of Wanda, was even powerful enough to defeat the Phoenix Force, which is known for being extremely stubborn, resilient, and of course, pretty much invincible and indestructible. Now granted, the Phoenix Force did not remain defeated forever, it was not permanently destroyed, but that wasn't really as a result of Scarlet Witch and or Hope being ineffective. That was more to do with the cyclical nature of comics where, well, rarely anyone or anything remains dead, banished, or defeated. Hope is unstoppable because her mutant power allows her to adopt any other mutant powers, so really the only way to defeat her would be to put her in an isolation chamber, and good luck getting her there, considering that she currently lives on an island where she is constantly surrounded by all kinds of mutants from all different alignments and where some of the most powerful mutants known to us reside. And then there's also the fact that, I mean, technically Hope kind of worked with Wanda's powers, and now Wanda isn't a mutant, so what does that even mean? Does that mean Hope can just take any powers? I'm still not sure about that. Number 4. Miranda. Miranda doesn't have a fancy codename. She's just Miranda. While not necessarily canon in the main continuity, Miranda is still one of the most unstoppable mutants I could think of, so I'm including her here, despite the fact that I believe she does exist outside 616. Although with her power set, that is something that seems like it could easily and quickly change if Miranda willed it to be so. Miranda is from the story X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, a limited series covering only one arc by Max Bemis and Michael Walsh. We are introduced to Miranda through Bailey Hoskins, who is the self-proclaimed worst X-Man ever. Bailey's powers allow him to self-detonate, in essence a human bomb, but that is all he can do, which means that it's kind of a one-use power, therefore lame and not really useful at all, because, you know, if you use it, you'll be dead. Bailey also isn't particularly skilled, athletic, or smart. On the contrary, his friend Miranda can warp reality, shaping it as she sees fit. If Bailey is the worst, Miranda is kinda the best. While Miranda does use her powers, Bailey doesn't even seem to notice at one point, calling her out years later for not doing enough, when, oddly enough, the whole time, Miranda has been unknowingly saving the whole world and possibly the universe multiple times over, which she reveals and is like, I was here the whole time like saving everyone, but you know, I just changed reality so no one really notices. Number 3. Squirrel Girl. I mean, isn't unstoppable just a synonym when you think about it for unbeatable? For some reason, when it comes to mutant lists, I always tend to forget that Squirrel Girl herself is a mutant. I don't know why I forget about Duran because I love her so much. And this also happens to me despite the fact that when we're first introduced to her in the comics, she advertises herself to Iron Man as a mutant. I guess it's because Squirrel Girl, despite being a mutant, is not often associated with the X-Men, but instead prefers to align herself more with the Avengers, or the Great Lakes Avengers anyways, and other Avenger-based teams. Number 2. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might strike you as an odd pick for one of our top spots on this list, but with what he has been up to lately, I gotta say, I think he deserves it. As we ramp up to the Sins of Sinister event, which I'm sure is going to be a banger, but also end up destroying the beautiful golden era that has been X-Men comics recently, and Krakoa. Poor Krakoa. Sinister is quickly becoming the most powerful he has ever been. Currently, this is all thanks to his Moira protocols, as revealed in Immortal X-Men. With the Moira protocols, Mr. Sinister can control the timeline, basically tweaking it as he sees fit to better understand the best way for him to shape the world as he would like it to be. If he makes a change that doesn't actually work out for him in the end, he just destroys that powered Moira clone that he has to erase that change and outcome, and then kinda like tries again. So this allows him, with all the Moira clones that are powered, to try, well, infinite possibilities for what the world could be, which is pretty scary. This is an insane level of power and could possibly make him one of the most unstoppable mutants ever, unless a whole bunch of mutants and heroes are able to do something about this. Though, he might not be the most unstoppable. Number 1. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is truly unbeatable. Even the closest I have ever seen to her being beaten, she wasn't really beaten at all. She still won, but in winning, she also kinda lost. Does that make sense? Let me explain. The Fisher King on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars, following the events of AXE and the invasion of the Eternal Uranos, who destroyed much of the planet and many of its mutant population, ended up challenging Iska to a battle of understanding. The Fisher King did this as a way of getting back at Iska the traitor, who had turned on her own people in the past, and then did so again when Uranos first attacked the planet, turning on her fellow Seats on the Great Ring of Arakko. This is not something Iska chose to do, but something she was forced to do as a result of her power, because she can never lose. And so to beat her in his own way, knowing that he wouldn't win, the Fisher King challenged her to a battle of understanding, where the winner is the one who most truly understands the meaning of loss. Ho ho ho! As you can imagine, Iska won, but in so doing, she felt great grief over all that she had lost and chose to leave Arakko and resign her seat on the Great Ring. This is the closest I've ever seen to Iska losing something, and still, she technically won because she understood grief the best between the two, or understood the idea of loss, I should say. Iska is such a fascinating character, so while she is gone, for now, from Arakko, I do hope we continue to see her appear in the X-books. I mean, who knows, maybe she'll be the key to defeating Sinister? I don't know. Number 10. Moira McTaggart. Moira McTaggart, when she was a mutant, was pretty unstoppable. I mean, she almost single-handedly destroyed all mutants from behind the scenes, which I think is pretty wild. And she also posed as someone working to save all mutant kind on various occasions, which I think also made her unstoppable in a different kind of way. Moira McTaggart, of course, is no longer a mutant in the comics, as she was depowered, but her mutation was reincarnation, with the knowledge of prior lives lived carry that forward into her next life. In fact, Moira's power was so great that it was proven to be connected to the very fabric of time and reality, with the whole universe seemingly resetting after each of her deaths. This also means that even after being depowered, Sinister was able to create and use clones of Moira with their mutant gene activated to predict the outcome of various events and shape reality in his own image. In essence, Sinister can now use Moira, or more specifically Moira clones, to attempt various tactics in order to get things as he would like them. Now, when a tactic fails, he simply destroys that Moira clone, thereby erasing that tactic, its outcome, and the resulting timeline/reality. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when I talk about mutants, I know I love it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards might not have his powers currently in the comics, but that doesn't stop him from being one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, and definitely the most unstoppable, at least across time. Besides, I'm pretty sure Franklin will have his powers and his mutant status back eventually. Like Gwenpool, Franklin was also revealed to have willed himself into becoming a mutant, although he did so subconsciously, which is even more nuts. Franklin's powers were of the reality warping variant, and apparently without knowing it, he used them to make himself appear as a mutant. However, as his powers waned, it was made clear that he was not truly one, but simply appearing as one thanks to these powers. And apparently this was confirmed when we noticed that, yeah, Franklin, oh wait, no, you're not actually a mutant, you're just a depowered mutate, so whoops. This is why he ended up getting rejected from Krakoa, although Professor X did not appear to Franklin personally, but simply in his astral form. Number 8. Darwin. Darwin is one of the mutants who was brought on the mission to infiltrate the Children of the Vault's home base, known of course simply as the Vault. Darwin was handpicked for this mission due to his unique mutation, which allows him to adapt to any situation, evolving himself to best survive whatever he comes up against. For this reason, he's pretty unstoppable. This is also why the Children of the Vault valued him and ended up capturing him, because his mutation was also valued amongst them and makes them a lot more unstoppable as they can implement it into their own evolution to help them evolve smarter and faster, making them even more formidable foes for the X-Men. Number 7. Sunspot. Sunspot is a mutant that I feel I do not talk about enough on this channel, so I'm using this list to grow his ego just a little bit more. Sunspot is unstoppable in many ways. He's not only powerful as a mutant, even willing to give his life to save the day, refusing to be stopped by whatever problem comes his way, but he's also insanely ruthless when it comes to the world of business. He is wealthy and so often can break through barriers that some mutants might be limited by due to their income bracket. Besides that, Roberto is probably also one of the most stubborn characters, not even just mutants, that we have in comics, and for that reason he is also personally pretty unstoppable, as he doesn't usually give up or throw in the towel easily. And if you want to talk about power levels, woo! Sunspot has been referred to before as one of the most powerful mutants ever. Now granted, I think he was the one who called himself that, but Bobby's ego aside, I do actually myself believe him to be one of the most powerful. Number 6. Destiny. I love this suggestion from Jamie Dowdy, who commented on our last video saying, "I think Destiny will be the ultimate stop to Sinister. She's got something planned, as always." And I imagine a smirk at the end of this comment. As always, smirk. Because, well, you are so right, Jamie. Destiny does always have something up her sleeve. This is just because she is so good at seeing the future. There is very little Destiny seemingly can't see when it comes to all the multiple possibilities of the world. And I do agree that Destiny will likely play a key role in the demise later on of Sinister. Straight out of the gate, she threw many wrenches into his various attempts to enact his plan. If it weren't for Destiny, Sinister would have succeeded potentially a lot more easily and sooner. Also, people never think of mutants with precognitive abilities as being unstoppable because, well, they're usually pretty squishy, but you don't have to worry as much about being squishy when 1. Your wife is one of the most deadly mutants, Mystique, and 2. You can pretty much just like sidestep almost any and all dangers headed your way by seeing their potential before they have even arrived. Number 5. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the best telepathic minds we have in the comics. She has proven herself to be even more powerful than some of the most iconic telepathic mutants, such as Professor Xavier himself, at one point laying traps in Cyclops' mind with which to ensnare Xavier should he attempt to enter Scott's mind, which of course he did. Emma also has proven how deadly she is when she manipulated the mutants into going to war during the Inhumans vs. X-Men event. Not her finest moment, to be sure, as a hero. Speaking of her being a villain, she also successfully stole Storm's body for a time in a body swap, managing to briefly infiltrate the X-Men, and even when Emma isn't using her own powers and mastering them, she's proving how powerful she is while using someone else's, like when she swapped bodies with Iceman and was able to use his powers to turn into water and travel through currents. So not only is Emma a powerful telepath, teacher, and businesswoman in her own right, but she can also be quite good at mastering mutant skills and power sets which don't even belong to her, which is probably what also makes her a really good teacher. Number 4. Mad Jim Jaspers. He is a weird mutant that actually started out as a villain who was anti-mutant himself. Mad Jim Jaspers was in essence someone who was seen as pro-human and anti-mutant until people realized he himself was a mutant with reality warping powers. He ended up being quite the foe as well, and despite having died multiple times, has returned time and time again. Most recently, he returned in Otherworld, first spotted there during the Otherworld tournament showcased in the Ten of Swords event. Jim literally just popped up there as the person in charge of the crooked market in Otherworld, a sort of black market in the fantasy world where a person can literally find and acquire anything they could possibly think of, no matter how rare, elusive, or seemingly forbidden. The even stranger thing is, last we saw him before this, I believe Jaspers was once again dead, and his random appearance was not explained here. So we still don't really know how he came back to life and got to Otherworld. I suppose we can chalk that up to just how unstoppable Mad Jim and his power set are. Number 3. Synch. Synch has recently become one of the most OP mutants to many X-Men fans. He was resurrected on Krakoa earlier as he was needed for a mission to infiltrate the Vault, where the children of the Vault had retreated to. The team was 3 mutants who are known for their unstoppable level of resilience, especially combined. It included Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, currently known as Wolverine, Darwin, and Synch. Of the 3, only Synch seemingly survived and escaped once they had the intel that they needed. Although later we learned that Laura also managed to survive, so now we kind of have 2 Lauras in the comics, old Laura and younger Laura, as she was initially believed dead and therefore resurrected. Synch was able to get valuable information back to Krakoa before dying himself and being resurrected once more in a younger body. You see, in the Vault, time moves differently, so he and the team had actually lived there for hundreds of years, despite the fact that a much shorter period of time had passed outside of the Vault on Earth. Upon being resurrected, Synch's powers seemed to mutate further, allowing him to retain the powers of a mutant that he'd synced with previously, as opposed to only being able to use their powers while nearby and synced with them. Although using this power to its fullest extent does seem to be hard on Synch's body, so there is that. Number 2. Iceman. I think Iceman has proven time and time again that he can't be stopped. The story I recanted earlier where Emma was able to use Bobby's power while in his body to travel through water as water, that is also something Bobby himself can now do, as was evident when he fought recently against Fin Fang Foom in the first run of the Marauder series. His fellow mutants and teammates had thought that Bobby had been destroyed when in reality he hadn't. It looked like Fin Fang Foom obliterated him, but Bobby, being Bobby, he just turned to water, went into the ocean, and came back up again, proving that he is a force to be reckoned with. Even hell can't stop Bobby. He'll just freeze it over again, as he's also done in the past before. And to be honest, it would probably be even easier for him this time around, as he's continued to grow in power since then. You know you're unstoppable when you are able to do things like freeze hell over. Number 1. Storm. Storm is not just a mutant with unbelievably unstoppable powers, she is also a literal goddess. What does that mean? Well, it means that Storm can be even more unstoppable just from the power of belief. At one point, Storm ends up literally being confirmed as a goddess after people believed for her to be one for years. We are shown that when people believe in Storm, this gives her even more power, which is wild because base level power Aurora Monroe is already off the charts. Storm is a fearless leader who does not even fear death himself, even going so far as to dance with a version of Death, Apocalypse's son, and one of his original 4 horsemen. And she beats Death in combat too, which is pretty wild. Of course, you know, this isn't Mistress Death, but it simply goes to show how fearless Storm is, whether we're talking literal death, metaphysical death, or an alternate representation of death, in the comments. Number 10. Jean Grey. Probably the most iconic mutant to have ever merged with the Phoenix Force and acted as its host would be, of course, Jean Grey. And there are many who would also consider her to be still one of the most unstoppable hosts for the cosmic entity pretty much of all time. This isn't even just because of feats she has accomplished while merged with the Phoenix Force, but because even without it, she is known as a force to be reckoned with. Or maybe not reckoned with. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to deal with that reckoning. I'm not messing with Jean. I don't think you should either. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when I get to talk mutants, I love when I get to talk mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I know I'll be giving it a thumbs up because I get to talk about mutants. Woo! Number 9. Stepford Cuckoos. The Stepford Cuckoos are like Emma's children. Basically little Emma clones that were made with her own eggs, which were actually stolen from her when she was comatose. So genetically speaking, they are like Emma's offspring, but also were made almost exactly in her image, hence, you know, why we sometimes refer to them as clones. Kind of a little bit of both, really. Like Emma, they too have been considered by the Phoenix Force as potential preferred hosts. For a time, they were even chosen by the entity to act as its hosts, with 3 out of the initial 5 who were still alive at the time becoming phoenixes, and the other 2 being resurrected kind of to an extent. Although the Stepford Cuckoos would not maintain their status as Phoenix Force hosts, and struggle with both programming within them and the Phoenix Force basically vying for control over them from within, they would at least get to keep fragments of the Phoenix Force within themselves afterwards, trapped in their secondary mutation, their diamond hearts, which if you didn't know, the Stepford Cuckoos have diamond hearts. However, eventually even these Phoenix fragments within them would escape, so sad. No longer Phoenix at all. Number 8. Magik. Although Magik wasn't a host for the Phoenix Force for as long as some of the others have been that are on this list, she is still one of the most capable mutants in my mind to have been a host. Magik is Illyana Rasputin, younger sister to Mikhail and Pyotr Rasputin. Her mutant power is known to be teleportation, but thanks to her ending up trapped in the limbo dimension for basically years, she is also pretty adept when it comes to experiences with demons and with magic. For a good long while, Magik was the ruler of limbo, and while in that realm possessed unlimited power, and even when outside of it, Magik was probably not someone that you would want to mess with. Even today, even with her not being the ruler of limbo, you don't want to mess with her. She not only is a mutant teleporter who is gifted in magic, but she is also an amazing fighter as well. The only reason that she even lost the Phoenix Force was because she was willing to take things further than her brother Colossus was at the time, who was also a host for a piece of the Phoenix Force. This prompted a disagreement between brother and sister, with basically Spider-Man egging them on because it was to his advantage. Their fight escalated and resulted in them both losing their connection to the Phoenix Force, which was instead passed on to 2 of the other members of the once Phoenix 5, strengthening their connection to the Force. You know. Number 7. Namor, or Namor. Namor is simply one of the most powerful mutants around. Completely unstoppable in that almost every element of the character, in terms of power anyways, is considered to be close to, I would say, a 10 out of 10. Maybe even higher than that. Namor's pretty powerful. Namor is super strong, durable, can fly, can survive survive underwater, and is royalty, often having the full support of Atlantis, which he can pretty much call on at any time. He's smart, conniving, and ruthless, which makes him probably one of the most unstoppable mutants to have ever existed, even considering the fact that he is actually the first mutant to have ever existed at Marvel Comics. Fun fact. Namor didn't have the power of the Phoenix Force for long when he was part of the Phoenix Five, but what he lacks in length of time as a host, he definitely makes up for in raw, default power of a mutant, and also just as a character. Number 6. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is a mutant who we know as being super powerful just kind of by default, I would say. This isn't even so much because of what she is capable of with her powers, although that too is quite impressive, but because Emma is both a survivor and a thriver. She's just a powerful character. She is resourceful, smart, cunning, and hardworking. As a result, there isn't much that Emma can't do when she puts her mind to work. And I don't just mean psionically as a telepath either. Emma is an extremely successful teacher and businesswoman besides, which is all a testament to the strength of her sense of determination, and I think to an extent of her character. Emma ends up being one of the last mutants standing amidst the Phoenix Five during Avengers vs. X-Men, and this isn't the only time that Emma would end up as a host for the Phoenix either. Emma had actually already ended up as the host for the entity prior to this event, albeit temporarily, although of course that time around she almost completely was corrupted by the sheer power of the Force, so there is that I guess to consider. Number 5. Kid Omega. Quentin Quire hasn't really had much time as the Phoenix Force because we've only really ever seen him actually become the Phoenix in an alternate future reality. But although we only got to see him briefly, his appearance did at least seem impressive there. In the alternate future of 13729, one of the realities dubbed as the Future X-Men, Quentin eventually grows up, has a son, and yes, fulfills his self-prophesied destiny in becoming the host of the Phoenix Force. Number 4. Cyclops. Cyclops isn't usually one of the first mutants that comes to my mind when I think like unstoppable or most unstoppable. I mean, Cyclops is unstoppable, but you know, he's not usually in my top 10 in my mind. But when it comes to his time as the Phoenix Force host during Avengers vs. X-Men, well, that's a rare incident where he actually does really stand out as an unstoppable character. This is not because of Cyclops' base abilities and power levels, which, you know, not to knock those, but it's actually because when he was in fact a host of the Phoenix, he ended up being the last one standing as a member of the Phoenix Five, even outlasting Emma Frost. And when his old mentor, Professor X, came to try and plead with Cyclops, and basically free him from the Phoenix's influence, helping a whole cast of superpowered characters to defeat him, even that failed to actually stop Scott, which is pretty crazy. In fact, all they succeeded in doing there was basically pissing Scott off, which resulted in the Phoenix-infused Cyclops killing Charles in response. Number 3. Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers has the potential to be even more impressive than her own mother when it comes to her capabilities with the Phoenix Force. She is the alternate reality daughter of Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, and Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. And she's also kind of the daughter of the Phoenix, I think, because I think in the reality she hails from 811, Jean and the Phoenix are like merged too, so she's also kind of literally the Phoenix's daughter. She might not be quite as untamed as Jean is, but in fact it is Rachel's more tempered sense of control as the Phoenix host that makes her so powerful. Rachel has been depicted as a more stable Phoenix host in comparison to Jean, and despite her own fiery persona, is a lot less likely to go off the rail and do something crazy like, you know, destroy a planet. Even though technically that wasn't even really Jean exactly who did that, but the Phoenix who had adopted Jean's consciousness and was in essence basically impersonating her. But either way, we sure do like to hold it over Jean's head anyways, so yeah, poor Jean. There's some characters in comics that I feel like we hold so many things over their head, and Jean is definitely one of those characters where I'm like, I feel like she's done enough. I feel like also it wasn't really even Jean technically. We can forgive her. Oh well. Number 2. Wolverine. If you're wondering when exactly this happened in the main continuity, I'm sorry to say that it did not happen in the main continuity. But it did happen in the reality of Earth 14412, where Logan became known as Old Man Phoenix. In this reality, humanity was completely wiped out, and even though Logan himself also somehow died, he returned to life later on as a chosen host for the Phoenix Force, which, you know, does make sense. That is what the Phoenix does. It loves to resurrect people, you know what I mean? He would also be the person to lend his powers to the alternate future version of Allfather Thor in this reality to help him in his fight against Doom. At this point in Doom's history in this alternate future, he had not only survived humanity being wiped out, but he also had acquired various different superhero-based powers and artifacts, which basically gave him a massive power boost. Fortunately, Thor, with a Phoenix Force boosted Mjolnir, was able to take on and defeat Doom. Of course, you know, Wolverine kind of had to give up his life to make that happen, but of course, it's the Phoenix Force, so afterwards Logan was just brought back because that's how the Phoenix Force do. Number 1. Hope Summers. Definitely one of the most powerful Phoenix Force holders out there among mutants would have to be Hope Summers. Hope is just hands down one of the most powerful mutants around, period, and is basically nigh unstoppable, just like across the board. Well, I mean, you might be able to stop her if you have like a bunch of clones of Moira McTaggart at your disposal, which you can then use to build and explore a multitude of possibilities via the creation and destruction of alternate timelines. I digress. Most people don't have that anyways. Other than that, I would say that Hope is pretty unstoppable. She's so powerful that many writers tend to just completely leave her off the table, or make it so there is some reason that she can't really be actively involved in the story. She's just a little too powerful. Case in point, when she was at the center of Avengers vs. X-Men, but basically was relegated to the background for most of that event, with the excuse of it basically being for her own good or her protection. And yet even in that story, she was instrumental in solving the problem of actually what to do with the Phoenix Force, with the help of Scarlet Witch using it to bring back the mutants and then defeating the cosmic entity by in essence banishing it from existence, for a while at least. I will also add that I think one of the most insane feats you can accomplish with the Phoenix Force becoming one of its hosts is to basically merge with it and then, even in the face of all that power, reject it, which is basically what Hope did, as her time as the Phoenix was super short. But to me, that's just more unstoppable. Number 10. Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler does not get enough love on our channel. I know at times I can be the one ragging on him, but at the end of the day, I really do love Kurt Wagner. I think he is a fascinating character and one of the most complex individuals that we actually have on the X-Men team. Even though his teleportation powers are not as impressive as some other mutant teleporters that we have, such as Magic or Manifold, Nightcrawler is still a character whose determination and faith tend to be his driving force, helping him to do the unimaginable at times. And there is no length to which he wouldn't go to help out his teammates, his friends, and his family, the X-Men. In fact, at one point, Nightcrawler even left heaven after his death and returned to life just to help them out. That's pretty wild. Can't stop that. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not let us know that you love us by clicking that subscribe button? Do it! And if you already did it, thank you. You're great. Number 9. Moira McTaggart. You wouldn't have likely thought of Moira McTaggart as an unstoppable mutant. Probably though because you wouldn't have even thought of her as being a mutant. But here we are, and here she is. She is a mutant. During the Krakoan era of the X-Men comics, it was revealed to us right near the beginning, during the Dawn of X period, that Moira this entire time was actually a mutant. What? And what's even more insane is she might have one of the most interesting and powerful abilities out there. Her power allows her to resurrect after her death, but not by coming back to life, but simply by living her life all over again, thereby resetting the continuity, manipulating the very fabric of reality and how we perceive it. Moira has lived multiple lives, always remembering the ones that came before. This gave her knowledge which allowed her to manipulate the course of history. Number 8. Wolverine. One of the most skilled and effective trackers we have over at Marvel Comics, and I would say probably one of my most favorite characters. If you try to run from him, there is likely nowhere safe for you to hide, at least not on planet Earth, and even possibly not in the cosmos either. Has Wolverine ever gone to track someone across the stars? Because that is a story I would love to read. Oh wait, there was something similar to that in the X-Men Infinity comic, where Wolverine was tracking lost mutants through space. Those are the little online ones that you can get on Marvel Unlimited that you scroll through, by the way. They're kind of like webtoons. Wolverine is not a man who often gives up, even when he wants to, and based on how tragic his life has been, there have been many moments where Wolverine has wanted to call it quits, but even then he keeps on going. Not even his own will to give up can stop him from soldiering on. Number 7. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister isn't just one man, he can literally be an army of clones. What is more unstoppable than that? Well, not much. Especially when you consider just how brilliant and deadly he and each of his clones can be, with their immense knowledge of mutant DNA and twisted approach to evolution. Mr. Sinister isn't just one of my favorite mutants because of his fabulous look, although that definitely only makes me love him more, to be honest. It's because he's always up to something, always scheming and planning and hiding in the shadows. And when Sinister schemes, it can be dangerous, like to the point that he can take over the whole world by manipulating and tailoring the timeline to his liking. That kind of dangerous. See Sins of Sinister for more on what I'm talking about there. Number 6. Exodus. We don't talk about Exodus enough. As you know, I'm a big fan of psionic powers outside of, I would say, super speed and teleportation. I think this might actually be like my favorite power set, and definitely is one of the power sets I consider to be the most powerful. Why do I love it so? Why do I consider it to be so powerful? Because it allows you to defeat someone without ever having to really lift a finger. In the physical world anyways. Exodus might not be as well known as some of the others on this list, but trust me when I say he is one of the most powerful telepaths and telekinetics out there. We have seen him prove himself in psionic battles against ancient eternal creatures that were in essence kinda like dragons. In fact, I believe he even literally fought a dragon as well at one point. Exodus not only has his mutant powers, which were at an insane level already when they first manifested, but he also had them enhanced by Apocalypse, making him even more powerful. In fact, he is considered to be one of the most powerful mutants in existence. If that doesn't make him unstoppable, I do not know what would. Number 5. Cassandra Nova. I mean, Cassandra Nova is seriously just crazy. I love her, and I also kinda love to hate her. I mean, that's the beauty of Cassandra Nova. Technically, she is not quite a mutant. Instead, she is a Mumadrai, which is basically like an evil twin that you have to defeat to be born, at least according to the Shi'ar. In Cassandra's case, she is the evil twin of Charles Xavier, whose powers first manifested in the womb before he was born, so that he might stop Cassandra, who attacked him at that time. As a result, Cassandra was defeated and Charles lived on, being born into the world. However, even then, this wouldn't be the end for Cassandra. She actually survived as basically a collection of cells that look like goo, and she managed to once again manifest, returning even stronger than she was before. And yeah, like I said, she's a Mumadrai, but she's also like a Mumadrai of Charles, so that kind of makes her a mutant, and right now, or at least recently, last time I was reading Marauders, she was fighting for the mutants because she kind of allied herself. She kind of saw herself as one. So I mean, yeah, it kind of depends on the story, but I think we can consider her a mutant. Number 4. Jean Grey. Jean Grey was once the Phoenix Force, but even without the Phoenix Force, she is a powerhouse. In fact, at one point Jean even stated the Phoenix Force was, get this, actually holding her back. What? Even without her connection to the Phoenix, even when she is not a host, Jean has proven herself as one of the most unstoppable mutants out there. She has gone toe to toe with gods and not only survived, but also won. Jean Grey is also one of the most unstoppable in the sense that she doesn't even really need to mess you up to win a fight with you. And I think that is a really impressive strength. Or rather, I guess I should say, she really only needs to mess you up mentally maybe, but then, even then, not in a way that leaves you like catatonic or anything like that. She isn't Xavier. She won't necessarily just like wipe your mind or anything like that. She doesn't need to. Instead, she'll give you an entirely new perspective that will make you change your own mind. Number 3. Magneto. While Magneto was stopped a while ago with him seemingly being killed during the long and epic fight that he had against Uranos, Magneto still wasn't even really stopped there. Now, allow me to explain. I know that's a contradiction. Minus everything that may or may not be going with him potentially returning from the dead in Scarlet Witch's comic, unless that's Joseph, his younger clone, and it could be. I'm not up to date on Scarlet Witch, so if there's some things that have come up in the last couple issues, don't spoil it for me in the comments. Magneto actually never died in his first battle with Uranos, despite literally having his heart removed. Magneto willed his blood to keep like pumping through his body, using the iron in his blood to help control and move it through him, with his mutant powers going into overdrive to act as a temporary replacement for his heart during the AXE or the Axe event, when he was essentially trapped on planet Arakko, aka Mars, as he also fought to defend it. And even during his rematch with Uranos, he really only went out because he chose to go. Sounds pretty unstoppable to me, I'm just saying. Number 2. Storm. Storm is one of the best, more badass characters that we have around. She is unstoppable on, honestly, a lot of different fronts. Not just because of her mutant powers to control the weather and manipulate the atmosphere around her, sometimes even the world over. Not just because of her insane fighting skills and physical prowess, and not even just because Storm is a goddess. And honestly, not even just because Storm is also an amazing leader, she's also that too. A lot of the time for me, it's Storm's spirit and her determination that just makes her the most unstoppable. She does not give up, even when it seems like defeat is basically inevitable. Storm makes her own path and does not let others define her, and that is both what I admire the most about her and what I think makes her often such a force to be reckoned with. Willful, strong, and undefeatable. Storm knows who she is and she isn't afraid to show it, and I love that about her. That's being unstoppable right there. Knowing who you are and being like, this is who I am, that's it. Take it or leave it, but you gotta take it because I'm unstoppable. Number 1. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is definitely one of the most unstoppable mutants around. He is one of, if not the, most deadly mutant that we have, I would say. There's a whole alternate reality where Apocalypse has successfully conquered the world, and there have been a few times where he's also come close to doing that in the main continuity. That's why I personally was both so amazed and so surprised, kinda scared, when I saw Apocalypse join the mutant nation of Krakoa. Initially my thoughts were, when is he gonna betray them, because that's gonna happen. But over time I came to understand that Apocalypse being so unstoppable didn't always have to be a bad thing, as he is also allied literally with all the mutants. He could actually be a force for good in that way, because if there's anything that Apocalypse does believe in, he believes in mutants, and so it kind of worked really perfectly that he'd work with them. Ultimately though, Apocalypse wants mutants to be at their best and to be on top. So as soon as there is a disparity between what he wants for mutant kind and what the people and other leaders of Krakoa want, he's probably gonna go back to being unstoppable in a more villainous way.
At number 10 is Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega, who's a prime example of an Omega level mutant who strayed down the dark path of villainy. Initially nurtured by Professor Xavier, who hoped for his potential, Quire's journey took a sinister turn. He formed the notorious Omega Gang, a group hell-bent on mercilessly attacking and, in some instances, unaliving non-mutants. What's truly remarkable, or perhaps terrifying, about Kid Omega is his status as not just an Omega level mutant, but a beyond Omega level mutant. His powers transcend the boundaries of mortality, allowing him to persist even beyond physical demise, an ability that he's exploited multiple times. But here's the twist. Quentin Quire's mental instability wasn't solely his own doing. He was a pawn in the grand scheme of Sublime, the true architect behind this nefarious substance that further warped Kid Omega's mind and corrupted his gang members. At number 9 is Mr. M. Mr. M is a name shrouded in enigma who holds a unique place among Omega level mutants who walk the thin line between heroism and villainy. This dude's abilities encompasses an astounding array from the psionic manipulation to telekinesis, telepathy, and the awe-inspiring power of energy manipulation. But his story takes a twist that mirrors the complexity of the mutant world itself. See, Mr. M's descent into darkness was triggered by a chilling prophetic vision, a harbinger of his transformation into a destroyer. You see, he believed that salvation for his cherished mutant town, a place he'd adopted after years of wandering, lay in eradicating all sickness and corruption. His intentions, albeit misguided, were fueled by a deep desire to protect his home. Though he ultimately failed in his quest, Mr. M remains an anomaly, one of the rare mutants who retain their powers after the cataclysmic M-Day event, leaving us to ponder the intricate interplay between power, purpose, and the blurred lines of heroism and villainy. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8, we have Shadow King. Shadow King was born from the darkest recesses of human consciousness, and is a complex and formidable Omega-level cosmic entity turned villain. Emil Frank, the mutant vessel for this malevolent entity, who's the mutant in question, possesses the power of telepathy that rivals even Charles Xavier. His psychic dominance extends beyond the ordinary, effortlessly manipulating formidable telepaths like Marvel Girl and Psylocke. But their true menace lies in his ethereal existence, requiring a host body to manifest in the material world. This parasitic attachment grants him extraordinary powers, but also vulnerability, as the demise of his host can disrupt his astral essence for extended periods. The Shadow Man's sinister history includes collaborating with Baron von Strucker to destabilize Britain before the Second World War, aiming to reshape global politics. His awareness of future events, the rise of the X-Men, and Charles Xavier adds a layer of intrigue to his villainous persona. The Shadow King's multi-universal presence and insidious abilities make him a formidable adversary, demonstrating the dark potential of Omega-level mutants when they fall into villainy. At number 7 is Magneto. Max Eisenhardt, also known as Magneto, stands as one of Marvel's most complex characters. See, initially he embodied the quintessential mutant villain, diametrically opposing Charles Xavier's dream of mutant-human coexistence. Magneto, who was a survivor of World War II, witnessed humanity's darkest facets, making peaceful integration unimaginable for him. Instead, he advocated for mutant supremacy in a genetic war, perceiving humans as the adversary. However, Magneto's narrative trajectory defies simple classification. See, he oscillates between adversary and ally, often leading the X-Men himself. His dynamic character extends to his role as a father, overseeing the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which evolved into a morally ambiguous ambiguous faction. In contemporary storytelling, Magneto leans towards anti-heroism driven by a fierce commitment to mutant protection. This complex evolution reflects the rich storytelling potential within Omega-level mutants, challenging the traditional hero-villain paradigm in the Marvel Universe. At number 6 is David Richards. Omega-level mutants are the cream de la crop in the mutant world, who usually stand as defenders of both mutants and humanity. But then there's David, a sinister twist in the narrative. He never reached the godlike heights of beings like Mad Jim Jaspers or Hyperion, but make no mistake, he's no ordinary mutant. Sentinels were like playthings for him. He manipulated Blink, teleportation virtuoso, into a macabre dance of suffering with thousands of innocent lives on the line. He's like, okay, imagine Professor X and Magneto and the Phoenix Force rolled into one malevolent entity, and you've got David. Thankfully, David himself never fully harnessed the Phoenix Force, but his penchant for terrorism sent shivers down spines everywhere. At number 5 is Scarlet Witch. Wanda Maximoff, also known as the Scarlet Witch, embodies the complex nature of Omega-level mutants gone awry in the Marvel Universe. Initially aligned with her father Magneto in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, she and her brother Quicksilver transitioned to heroism by joining the Avengers. However, Wanda's tumultuous history is marked by her struggles with mental instability and reality warping powers. Her pivotal role as the antagonist in the Avengers Disassembled and House of M storylines underscores her capacity for destruction. Notably, she dismantled the Avengers, rewrote reality during M-Day, and committed mass unalivings against Earth's mutant population. These cataclysmic events highlight the pearliest consequence of when an Omega-level mutant's powers are unhinged by personal turmoil. At number 4 is Omega Red. Before you all go yapping in the comments about how this dude's probably a beta-level mutant at best, he was described by Dazzler as an Omega-level mutant at one point, so I'm gonna try to defend him because he's actually really cool. Born Arkady Gregorovich Razovich, I definitely butchered that, I'm so sorry, in the depths of Soviet Russia, his past was veiled in darkness. There are interpretations of his origins where he was a mass unaliver, captured because his town was really small and there wasn't very many victims. But instead of facing justice, Razovich was handed over to the KGB for a sinister experiment, an attempt to create a super soldier akin to Captain America. The result was Omega Red, a mutant wielding superhuman strength, stamina, agility, and reflexes. His body also exudes lethal pheromones, aptly named lethal spores, which can swiftly extinguish the lives of ordinary humans. Yet this is just the tip of the iceberg. Implanted within his arms are retractable carbonadium tendrils, formidable weapons capable of ensnaring victims or lashing out like deadly whips. His endurance is staggering, allowing him to battle foes, including Wolverine, for hours without fatigue. At number 3 is Legion. Born from a secret union between Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller, his early life was marked by tragedy and obscurity. A survivor of a brutal attack, Legion's latent mutant abilities were abruptly awakened, which intertwined his mind with the consciousness of Jamiel Cabril, one of the assailants responsible for the attack. The subsequent psychic battle between his fractured psyche raged for years until he fell under the ominous influence of the Shadow King, which we talked about earlier. Under this malevolent puppeteer's control, Legion became an unwitting agent of chaos, committing heinous acts that fueled hatred and division. Eventually, when he briefly regained control, his actions still remained misguided. His attempt to fulfill his father's dream of human-mutant coexistence by assassinating Magneto backfired catastrophically, thrusting the world into an early revelation of mutants and leading to Xavier's tragic demise, thus leading to the entire events of the Age Apocalypse timeline until Bishop managed to rewrite history again by unaliving Legion himself. At number 2 is President X. In this alternate universe, Charles Xavier, who never established Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, decided to become a politician instead. Yup, that's all it took for Xavier to become the polar opposite counterpart to his 616 version, becoming completely wrathful, cruel, and a sadistic tyrant desiring nothing but total control over everyone around him. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, y'all. Though he's never revealed to be a mutant himself, it's speculated that Xavier's telekinetic abilities aided him in tracking down mutants across the nation. A stark contrast to his 616 counterpart, this Xavier exhibited a cruel and authoritarian rule, causing protests, notably from billionaire Anthony Stark. The catalyst for change arrived as Stark formed the Avengers to counter Xavier's regime, but unfortunately, Xavier's response proved devastating as a missile targeted the Avengers' Quinjet, obliterating its occupants. This tragic loss included iconic figures like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and wait a second, he took out Thor with the missile? Okay. With the big players gone, Xavier's oppressive reign expanded further, with all mutants confined to a grim prison in Texas, subjected to a psychological technological torment and horrific tendencies. And at number 1 is Vulcan, also known as Gabriel Summers, who emerges from the tangled web of mutant abilities as a formidable figure, overshadowing even his renowned brothers Scott and Alex. His tumultuous upbringing, marked by neglect and isolation, set the stage for his unparalleled powers. Unlike Scott's optic blasts or Alex's energy conversion, Gabriel possesses the astounding gift of energy manipulation and absorption, seemingly boundless in its potential. But what sets Vulcan apart is his ability to vicariously absorb vast quantities of raw energy and retain it within himself like a cosmic reservoir. This stored energy can be wielded at his discretion or redirected as needed, making him a walking powerhouse. In the annals of mutant classification, Vulcan has transcended traditional boundaries, earning him the elusive title of Beyond Omega Level from discerning minds like Rachel Summers. The Summers bloodline, it seems, has birthed not one, but 2 extraordinary mutants, with Rachel herself as a testament to the family's unparalleled genetic legacy.
Number 10, Dirtnap. Dirtnap is a weird character, but one who kind of has a beautiful story. Dirtnap originally appeared as one of Genesis's Dark Riders, Tyler Dayspring's Genesis. Dirtnap was a mutant with the ability to absorb beings into himself, thereby adopting their form. However, you would know it was Dirtnap because of a red smiley face that would appear somewhere on him, either on his clothes or his body while in that form. While fleeing from Wolverine, however, he absorbed a rat and either became stuck within or perhaps simply preferred this form, keeping it. Dirtnap would later on actually end up joining the X-Men, befriending Generation X, and even go on to sacrifice his own life to protect his team. However, during the Krakoan era, Dirtnap was spotted spying on Lockheed in 2022's Marauders in issue number 6, with an indicator visible that he had returned to his evil ways, that devilish red smiley face. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any good old nerdy content. Number 9, Abigail Brand. Abigail Brand is the head of SWORD, a division of S.H.I.E.L.D., specifically created to deal with defending the Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Aliens and any other external threats to the planet were SWORD's thing. Abigail Brand is one that we often forget about when it comes to heroes who are mutants because she is also an alien herself. Part alien anyway. Her dad was an alien and her mother was a human, but her mother was also a mutant, which is how Abigail herself ended up with an active X gene. Her mutant ability allows her to emit a hot blue energy from her hands that burns through most metals. She also can speak most alien languages, even ones that human mouths can't quite manage to wrap their tongues around. Number 8, Madeline Pryor. While Madeline has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she is not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been one. And surprisingly, she is not easily recognized. Well, actually, I guess while Madeline Pryor has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she's not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been one. Well, I mean, she does have her dark X-Men right now, but she kind of created that herself. I don't really know if we count that because she wasn't really recruited, but hey, you know what? She is kind of doing it. Surprisingly though, she's still not easily recognized. Trust me, I'm a Maddie cosplayer, and oftentimes people are confused when I'm dressed as her about who exactly I'm supposed to be. Madeline Pryor was created to be used as a pawn by Sinister to get the child he so desperately wanted, the offspring of Jean and Scott's genes, with Maddie being a clone of Jean Grey. In her romance with Scott Summers, she was abandoned, left alone with their newborn when he returned to the X-Men after Jean was revealed to still be alive. Maddie has it kinda tough in regards to her life, to be honest. But hey, you know, at least she's making some progress. I gotta say, I love to see it. Number 7, Manifold. Manifold is probably one of the most powerful teleporters we have out there, and he isn't even really technically a teleporter. Manifold's powers allow him to communicate with the universe and basically ask it to bend over backwards to do his bidding. He can just ask the universe to literally fold itself in half so that he can jump from one point to another point because it's been folded, moving even all the way across the universe and beyond, seemingly teleporting but really just communicating with the cosmos. The only downside to his powers is that because they're about communicating with the universe, he can really only do this within the 616 reality, because that's his universe. Recently, Manifold was part of the mutant adjacent SWORD team. Number 6, Silhouette. Silhouette is actually an awesome mutant. She is one of the few mutants who retained her powers after M-Day and is known as a magical or mystical mutant. Her powers originate from the universal spring known as the Well of All Things. She is the child of a Cambodian woman named Miami and an American man named Andrew Cord. Silhouette is both her alias and her birth name, and she is believed to be part of a group of descendants who are destined to have power and to unite the east and western ways of the world. After being partially paralyzed by a gunshot, Silhouette was forced to fight while using crutches. But this has never stopped her from kicking serious butt with a combination of dark force energy, teleportation, and impressive martial arts skills. Even when she has her crutches, actually, which I love. Love to see it. Number 5. Vulcan. Despite being one of the most powerful mutants around who is considered to be Omega level, Vulcan actually hasn't appeared as much. Some of the other more popular, but honestly, in most cases, less powerful mutants. Vulcan's mutant powers are energy manipulation and absorption. Despite his insane power levels, he tends to somehow be the lesser known of all of the Summers brothers. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well and use them for himself on rare occasions. That's OP. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabriel or Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1. Yet he is considered the most powerful of those three. Despite him technically being from Earth, Vulcan mainly grew up in space in a stasis pod where his aging was accelerated until the point of peak adolescence. Number 4. Tempo. Tempo is super cool. Having seen a little bit more of her through the Marauder series, I have been greatly impressed by her power set, I gotta say. Tempo basically has the power to manipulate and in a way control time. She can speed it up, slow it down, she can change the tempo of it, if you will, and can manipulate it in her own way. Time control to me is something that has always been super powerful. We don't see a lot of mutants that have that power, we don't see a lot of heroes that have that power. Did you know Tempo was actually one of the mutants who you could have voted for the X-Men elections in recent years? Yep, she received a nomination. However, she sadly did not win the vote, and as a result, she didn't get to be on the team. Sad. But at least she did get to be on the one-shot secret X-Men team, which I actually thought was pretty cool. I actually enjoyed that little one-shot. And later on, she would end up joining, of course, the Marauders. Number 3. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is truly unbeatable. Even the closest I have ever seen to her being beaten, she wasn't really beaten. She still kinda won that battle. Thanks to her mutant powers, the only way she could be beaten is if by her winning, she would also kinda lose. Sound confusing? Let me explain. The Fisher King on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars, ended up challenging Iska to a battle of understanding. The Fisher King did this as a way to get back at Iska, the traitor, who had turned on her own people in the past and again when Uranos first attacked. And so, to beat her in his own way, and knowing that he wouldn't win, he challenged her to a battle of understanding, where the winner is the one who most truly understands the meaning of loss. By winning, Iska was forced to feel immense grief over all that she had lost as a result of always having to be on the winning side as per her powers, and so in winning, she still lost. Number 2. Solemn. Solemn is one of the new X-Men villains on the block and also is of course a mutant. Solemn is a mutant from Arakko who instead of having adamantium bones possesses adamantium skin, which is actually his mutation as opposed to something that happened to him from Weapon X. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was one of the mutants that we expected to face off against Wolverine. But in an unexpected turn of events, Solemn didn't even really fight at all in that tournament. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird, but instead Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades together so that they could enter the tournament, and also use, of course, said blades in the tournament, forcing Wolverine to tap into the fight on his behalf. So that's how he got out of it. It's pretty powerful to have like Wolverine owe you a favor. That's what I think. I would definitely enjoy if Wolverine owed me a favor. He can do a lot of pretty crazy stuff for you. Number 1. Brimstone Love. Whether we're talking about the Brimstone Love of Earth 928 or the Brimstone Love of Earth 616, both are honestly extremely obscure. The original Brimstone Love, who first appeared in the Age of Apocalypse reality or AOA, only made 8 appearances, while the main continuity version of the character has only made, I believe, 3 appearances. Both are the leader and the man behind the Theater of Pain. Tragically, while Brimstone Love was a newer villain villain to the Earth 616 continuity, making his first appearance in the first annual issue number 1 of the second volume of Marauders from 2022. He also probably won't be seen again if you haven't seen him yet. This is because Brimstone Love perishes, or at least is believed to have perished as of the end of that Marauders run, issue number 12. He has a really great design, and his sadism was interesting to see, especially in one who is so strong in his convictions. So kinda sad to see him go, but yeah. Number 10. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formation. She can cause earthquakes and even use her powers to create diamonds. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents, sending them hurtling towards them. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day, Petra wonders if she caused. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk mutants on the channel, make sure you check out our X-Men playlist for even more good mutant content. Number 9. Nanny. While insane, Nanny was also once a scientist, and actually remains quite intelligent. She outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. She's basically super obsessed with finding mutants that are kids and taking care of them. Nanny herself is a low-level telepath who often uses pixie dust in battle to help influence and control the minds of her opponents. She herself has a suit that is small and egg-shaped, which contains her form, and it has been suggested that she might not be able to survive without it, or at the very least she just might have like a mental breakdown if she is forcibly removed from her suit. She's very attached to it, which honestly is pretty similar to how Peter, her charge Orphan Maker, tends to feel about his own suit, which actually does help to contain his unbelievably destructive powers, but more on that in a bit. Nanny made her own suit, I believe, and it also comes equipped with weapons, flight capabilities, teleportation, and the ability to generate its own repulsor field to push back enemies. Number 8. Orphan Maker. Orphan Maker still remains a relatively mysterious character, and is also one who proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. Orphan Maker is also known as Peter, and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he just decided to eliminate him. Nanny, however, was not for that. An insane cyborg lady, she decided to save him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Nanny outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. And while it's still unclear as to what Orphan Maker's true mutant powers are, and while he still seems to have the mind of a child, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, especially if he gets upset. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm him while Peter was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply just reflecting off the armor, which actually caused more harm than help in that battle. Number 7. Weapon H. Weapon H isn't an organization, but instead is the codename for the character known as Clayton Cortez. Clayton is an ex-military merc who turned on his employers, and as a result, he was captured and sold as a test subject to the Weapon X program, formerly known as the Weapon Plus program. They experimented on him and turned him into a Wolverine-Hulk hybrid known by many different codenames, including H-Alpha, Weapon H, and, you guessed it, Hulkverine. His transformation ends up bringing Wolverine and Hulk together, who attempt to hunt him down before realizing that Weapon H himself is also a victim, and attempting to help free him from the leader's control. Clayton is not your typical mutant, as he doesn't have an inherent X gene, but is pretty cool in that he's a lab-made mutant who is also a gamma mutate and a cyborg. He's so many things, really. Number 6. Peeper. Peeper is one of my favorite mutants, known as Peeper or Peepers. I tend to love mutants whose powers seem less than super, and Peeper is honestly one of those mutants. Peeper is a mutant who, honestly, all the other mutant stars that he's interacted with recently have been super sweet to, and I appreciate that. I love to see it. Peeper's powers have to do with his physical mutation, which is that he has enlarged eyes. With his eyes, he can see things that others can't, possessing different forms of sight. Recently, Peeper was using his powers to help out his fellow teammates as a member of Swords the Six, although he was not part of the main Six team, as he's not a teleporter, and the main Six of the Six or rather were a teleportation team. Instead, he worked with Sword to help expand the areas of mutant technology. Number 5. Tag. Tag is definitely one of the weirdest mutants out there when it comes to his abilities. Let me tell you about it. He is Brian Cruz, a mutant whose powers allow him to tag someone psionically, inciting a telepathic urge to either run away or run towards that person. Basically, he is the childhood game Tag personified. If you took the game tag from your childhood and you made said game a person who had mutant abilities in Marvel Comics, this is what you would get. Tag could use his powers to tag multiple people at a time, but if making them emit a psionic signal that encouraged others around them to run away, the range would actually top out at about 100 meters. Once at that distance, the urge to run away would then cease. Number 4. Adam X. We are going back to the crazy Summers family tree for this one. Oh boy, which if you haven't checked out that video, we got videos on that. Oh my gosh. What a time putting that together for you all. Adam X is the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. His mother is Catherine Summers, but his father was the Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire, Emperor Duran Naramani. Adam X's story clearly establishes the era of the comics that he hails from. See if you can guess when he first appeared before I finish this origin. Okay, you got a little bit more time. He was abducted when he was just a baby from the genetic lab in which he was created by Jonath, who became his adoptive father and raised him. Growing up, his mutant powers would manifest, which allowed him to basically set others' blood on fire, burning them from the inside out. He can also ignite his own blood, which is very painful, but grants him a speed boost, so there you go. Adam would then learn that he was a hybrid being, part Shi'ar, part mutant, and if all this made a 90s alarm go off in your mind, you would be right, he is an extremely 90s character. Number 3. Abyss. Nils Steiger is known by the codename Abyss. He is also a half-brother of Nightcrawler, on his father's side, meaning that he is also the son of Azazel. His powers allow him to unravel his body, which is made of wrappings. Yeah, if you've ever wondered what a mutant mummy would be like, this is pretty much it. He can use his wrappings to defend himself and attack with, and when wrapped up, his body is made more durable by them. Like his half-brother, he also shares a link to the Brimstone dimension. In the center of his chest, underneath his wrappings, is a dark void that when revealed acts like a black hole and can be used to basically suck in enemies, transporting and trapping them in the Brimstone dimension for as long as Abyss wants them to be trapped. Number 2. Sway. I love Sway. Her powers are so cool and her origin is so tragic, just like Petra, and they were around at the same time. Sway's powers manifested when she was just a teenager. While visiting New York City in preparation for college, Suzanne's parents and herself ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were gunned down during an attack that was part of a gang war. While Suzanne's parents were killed, she miraculously survived due to the manifestation of her powers, which allowed her to manipulate the flow of time. She had instinctively stopped the bullets that would have hit her in mid-air, but she didn't have the experience or understanding required to do so for her parents, tragically. Sway's powers allow her to control and manipulate time in her nearby vicinity. She can also rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to review past events, which I think is a super useful and super cool power, to be honest. Number 1. Ice Cream. I can't believe that Ice Cream recently actually made a new appearance in the comics. For years, he was one of the few mutants I knew of that had only ever had one singular appearance. He recently turned up again earlier this year after years of being absent, appearing in X-Men Before the Fall, Mutants First Strike issue number 1. Ice Cream initially appeared in a bizarre series called Obnoxio the Clown, which I believe itself only had, I think, 1 issue. Here Ice Cream is a villain who uses his abilities and mutant power to turn himself into ice cream to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. Honestly, sounds about right. Though how he'd expected to accomplish this with his power set being so ridiculous, I do not know. He doesn't succeed in that issue. Needless to say.
Number 10 is Spike. I talked about Marrow in part 8, so it's only fair that I talk about the animated X-Men Evolution character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different than hers. Similar to Marrow, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Marrow though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off, or fired as projectiles, doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot they were almost on fire, which actually kind of raises more questions that go unanswered than anything else. And at number 9 is Avalanche. You don't often get Greek mutants, which makes Dominic Petros a pretty unique character already. already. Dominic came from the Greek island of Crete, which is somewhere I desperately want to travel to, so if someone can hook me up with that'd be great, thanks. Like a lot of mutants though, he started out as a villain. Originally part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, then X-Corps, Project Wide Awake, Freedom Force, and Villains for Hire. He's gotten around, and with the destructive capabilities of his powers, it honestly kinda makes sense. Avalanche can create super powerful vibration waves from his hands. These waves can cause matter to shatter or crumble, and if he uses it on the Earth or even large buildings, he can basically create earthquakes or, wait for it, avalanches. But Avalanche has quite the control over this ability, able to move objects, create tidal waves, cause the ground to move or shatter, or even ride waves of Earth as transportation. And he even used his abilities to be a fantastic landscaper. If you guys are enjoying this content, I beg of you, slap that thumbs up button. It's the only thing you can do to prove you're loyal to me. I mean, to show your support. Number 8, the Blob. The Blob, or Frederick Dukes, is one of those characters I really didn't give enough credit to when I was growing up. He can actually do some pretty cool things, and some things that didn't even occur to me. His actual main mutant ability, for example, is that he can essentially become immovable by creating a monodirectional increase of gravity beneath him that extends out about 5 feet in radius from his center of balance. But what's even cooler is that with some training, Blob was able to manipulate his gravitational aura outwards in order to trigger a localized implosion. Also, the Blob is incredibly durable. The fat on the Blob is able to absorb the impact of rifle bullets, cannonballs, bazookas, and even torpedoes. He has even been able to survive being hit by a meteorite that was 50 feet in diameter moving at terminal velocity, which is insane. But that's not all. Blob is also able to manipulate his body, basically shapeshifting to a degree. After undergoing the Mother Vine enhancement process, Blob even developed a secondary mutation, liquid form. And here I thought he was just incredibly fat. Number 7, Caliban. If you have seen Logan, then you'll recognize Caliban as the bald, seemingly albino mutant who hangs out with Logan and Professor X. In that movie, he displays Caliban's main ability, which is being able to detect mutants' X genes, usually within about a 25-mile radius. Although, it's worth noting he has been able to detect particularly powerful mutants from further away before. But what I want to talk about is Caliban's other power that most people don't know. It's called his flight or fight response. So whenever Caliban feels stressed, he manifests 2 extra powers: super strength that can overpower Spider-Woman, and fear absorption. This second power allowed Caliban to absorb the psionic energy created in the fear from others and amplify it back into his environment, doing things like very quickly turning those nearby into a fear-induced panicking mob. This ability was boosted by Apocalypse twice when Caliban served him as both death and pestilence. Number 6, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from her home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not-so-great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, where she would do battle with the X-Men. She would go on to join the Acolytes and eventually the X-Men too. Now, she works as an agent of S.W.O.R.D. on Abigail Brand's X-Men Red Team. So, with a history like that, she has got to have some cool powers. Well, Frenzy's main power is invulnerability. She possesses steel-hard skin, which has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She's also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons and punch Jennifer Walters back if she wants to. Number 5, Typhoid Mary. Okay, so if you know who the Mutant Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that, only for Mary, she has only a handful of alternate personalities, and they just allow her to access the powers that just Mary can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others or influence people to do things without thinking, like kissing her or grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is a pretty quiet and timid person with no actual powers, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal and pretty much hated all men. Kind of understandable, sort of. And Mutant Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Number 4. Mask. The Morlock leader, Mask, has a pretty ironic ability. He himself is not exactly the most gorgeous of beings, but his abilities allow him to alter the appearances of others through touch, molding their bodies and features like clay, or just mentally influencing the change he desires. He can alter people's hair and skin color, body structure, and several other features, including turning limbs into tentacles. Mask can also use his powers in combat by making an enemy's limbs attached to their body, like that, or by closing their breathing orifices to limit their combat prowess. His powers of body manipulation later evolved so that he could alter his own flesh, but the new limits of his powers were stated to be a secondary mutation by Charles Xavier. Apparently, when Mask's body was pierced by Shatterstar's sword, Mask instinctively altered his own internal organs to help him survive, and ever since, he's been able to modify his own body. But what he can do exactly in terms of modifying his own body hasn't really been told yet, so we don't really know. Number 3. Christine Cord. Although Christine Cord, now going by Longstrike, doesn't actually have any mutant powers anymore after M-Day, she used to actually go by the name Tattoo, because her mutant ability was a chameleon skin that allowed Christine to form words or patterns on her skin which she could use to camouflage herself or convey messages. But she actually has a secondary ability in the form of biophasing. This basically meant that Christine was able to move through matter, and if she reached into another person, which is a terrifying thought, she could disrupt the neurochemistry of a person and or alter their molecular composition. Unfortunately, we won't know what else she could have possibly done because after losing her abilities and joining the New Warriors, she unfortunately did not live for too much longer. And at number 2 is Jeb Lee. Jeb Lee is one of the final horsemen of the mutant Apocalypse. He was chosen as Famine after Apocalypse watched Jeb using his drums at Gettysburg during the Civil War. Now, using his drums made Apocalypse choose Jeb as a horseman? Yes, it did, because Jeb has an incredibly unique mutant ability, which is to transmit a bio-auditory cancer that feeds on the flesh of all who can hear it whenever he makes a tapping noise, whether that be with his drums or even just tapping his fingers on a table. Jeb has a pretty, dark past, as you can probably imagine. Lee was a Confederate spy during the United States Civil War, walking the battlefields dressed as a Union soldier. Now, after returning back home, his Union Army uniform was discovered and his family was burned alive, which manifested his mutant powers. He then used these powers to go back to war, marching from battle to battle and taking the life of every human in his trail. And at number 1 is Daken. Daken, or Akihiro, possesses a lot of the same abilities as his father, Wolverine. He has a crazy healing factor, superhuman senses, and of course, bone claws. But what some people may not be aware of is the one mutation he possesses that neither his father nor his sisters possess. That power would be pheromone control. Daken has empathic pherokinetic abilities that allow him to use his pheromones to manipulate the emotional state and sensory perceptions of others. He has used this to instill intense fear, happiness, depression, fascination, and a false sense of security in others. The false sense of security, though, is the definitely most interesting one, as it has allowed him to sneak up on others without them even worrying that he could be there, which is so cool. He has also used this ability to alter others' depth perception and vision, making them fight sluggishly. He can also control his own pheromones to make him basically untrackable, even to someone like Wolverine. Now, there are limits to Daken's pherokinesis, but it is such a cool ability.